and I think this is a very huge topic, systemic therapy of early breast cancer. This encompasses basically the adjuvant treatment, which consists of adjuvant chemotherapy, hormone therapy.
Can you please start sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'll just do that.
Okay. Good.
So this is the presentation adjuvant chemotherapy of breast cancer. So since this is a very huge topic, so I'll be discussing adjuvant chemotherapy only of breast cancer, and adjuvant hormonal therapy. I will discuss some other time. Neoadjuvant also I have not included because the number of slides were becoming a problem for us, and still I've not been able to encompass this topic in within 100 slides. So I think we'll go through them as soon as possible without uh, uh, making this class boring. And I think I can take questions after the class. If you're interested in asking anything, you can ask me. You can message. I'll take questions afterwards. So, without wasting much time, I think we should start. And if the class starts to get boring, then you should tell me. I think we can stop there and take another class. Whenever Dodul will offer me an opportunity, I'll be happy to take another class. So let's start. I think I'm audible and visible too. So if any problem is there, please ping. Thank you. So we'll see the different topics. Why adjuvant chemotherapy? Rationale behind it. What is the evidence for benefit of adjuvant chemotherapy? Do all patients require adjuvant chemotherapy? How to select adjuvant systemic treatment? What adjuvant chemotherapy should be selected? When to start? How many cycles? And toxicity. So these all topics we'll discuss. So why adjuvant chemotherapy is recommended? So there are two hypotheses. One is Fisher hypothesis, another is Gomparzian model. I think every one of you must have read about these things. So this is William Halsted. He invented Halsted radical mastectomy, and he believed that breast cancer arose in one location, spread to nearby lymph nodes, and then throughout the body. So he was the pioneer behind this thought. So he actually advocated the removal of breast, chest wall muscle, and lymph nodes as a logical treatment. So this is Bernard Fisher. He gave this alternative hypothesis that breast cancer is a systemic disease and tumor cells are likely to have been disseminated throughout the body at the time of diagnosis, and locoregional therapy will not improve survival. So he was the chairman of NSABP Multi-Center RCT in 1967. So Fisher hypothesis was breast cancer is considered a systemic disease at the time of diagnosis, condition requiring treatment of entire patient rather than just the source organ. What was the Compassion model? And this is a short note also, which comes in the DM exam or radiation oncology MD exam. So it was given by Benjamin Gomparz in 18th century. So it was law of mortality. When the tumor starts growing in early stages, the growth rate is highest, and as the tumor increases in size, the growth rate becomes slower at later stages. This is Gomparzian model. After nearly 150 years, Dr. Larry Norton was there, and he gave this Norton and Simon hypothesis that tumors follow Gomparzian model. Smaller tumors grow faster than larger one. Rate of cell killing by many drugs is proportional to tumor growth rates. and tumor given less time to regrow between treatments are more likely to be destroyed. So shorten the interval between chemotherapy treatments from 3 weeks to 2 weeks. He actually advocated that, given that hypothesis, and high density dosing that improves survival. So this is the Norton-Simon hypothesis graphical interpretation. You can see here standard regimen. After the 4 cycles of standard regimen, tumor again started growing. Here, this is another graphic which shows on the right side the dose dense regimen. It decreases the cell number and it was in remission only. So, what is the evidence for benefit of adjuvant chemotherapy? Came from EBCTCG meta-analysis. It is very important thing and very important trials they have done. So this meta-analysis in 2011, it basically proved that if there is a benefit to adjuvant chemotherapy compared with no treatment, or is there a benefit to anthracycline-based regimens compared with CMF. In 2012, it told us that roles of taxanes in adjuvant chemotherapy of breast cancer is there. So in 2011, compared with no treatment, the use of anthracycline containing regimen, it was associated with better breast cancer mortality rates, absolute gain of 6.5%. In overall mortality, absolute gain of 5%. Compared with no treatment, use of CMF was associated with breast cancer mortality, relative risk of 0.76. That actually is equal to absolute gain of 6.2%. In overall mortality, 10 years, absolute gain of 4.7% was there. When they have compared anthracycline based with no improvement, more than 4 cycles, or cumulative doses of more than 240 milligram per meter square, compared with CMF, was associated with absolute gain of 4.1% in breast cancer mortality and absolute gain of around 4% in overall mortality. So there is generally preference of anthracycline containing regimen as adjuvant chemotherapy. Standard dosing of anthracycline based therapy is equivalent, though less effective than more anthracycline intensive regimens. So, but this data did not take into account the use of taxanes, only anthracyclines versus CMF. In 2012 meta-analysis, the trial showed 8-year outcomes. The reduction in breast cancer mortality is about 2.8% in breast cancer specific OS, and overall mortality 3.2% improvement in OS. So this affirms the benefit of taxanes when incorporated into adjuvant settings for women with newly diagnosed breast cancer. The benefits were seen independent of age, nodal status, tumor size, tumor grade, and ER status. So do all patients require adjuvant chemotherapy? And how to select adjuvant systemic treatment? Which regimen? So this is a slide depicting St. Gallen's Consensus Conference 2017 recommendations and NCCN 2017. In HER2 positive tumors, St. Gallen says that if tumor is more than 0.5 centimeter or node positive and anti-HER2 antibody therapy, trastuzumab should be given. Chemotherapy should be given. In NCCN, they say that adjuvant chemotherapy for tumors more than 0.5 centimeter and or node positive. So they also gave similar recommendations, but in node positive patients, if pertuzumab is added, it actually improves survival or DFS also. In HER2 negative tumors, ER negative patients, adjuvant chemotherapy for T1B or larger tumors and positive axillary lymph nodes. In ER negative, HER2 negative, NCCN says more than 1 centimeter and or node positive, and consider not strong recommendations, but consider between 5 mm to 10 mm. In HER2 negative tumors, St. Gallen says ER positive, low tumor burden, strong positive, PT1A, PTV, no nodal N0 disease, low proliferation, low grade, low genomic risk, only endocrine therapy. To be added, chemotherapy to be added if ER positive but intermediate risk, and clinical risk is intermediate or high as depicted by node positivity, add chemotherapy. Or when patient is having high risk features like low ERPR expression, high tumor burden, T3 or N2 N3 disease, more or higher Ki67, intermediate to high genomic risk. Then in ER positive, HR negative, chemotherapy should be given. NCCN says adjuvant chemotherapy if node positive, and risk stratification you should do by Oncotype DX recurrence score for node negative patients, and then only according to the risk profile you should select the chemotherapy. So these are the subtypes: luminal A-like, only endocrine therapy. If they are having higher tumor burden, T3, N1 disease, 4 or more lymph nodes, or higher, or grade 3 disease, chemotherapy is recommended. In luminal B-like, HER2 negative, both endocrine therapy plus chemotherapy for majority of the cases. In HER2 positive, luminal B, chemotherapy, anti-HER2, endocrine for all the patients. HER2 positive, non-luminal, again chemotherapy, anti-HER2, triple negative, chemotherapy only. So these are some St. Gallen's recommendations for different spatial histological subtypes. So if endocrine responsive like cribriform, tubular or mucinous type is there, endocrine therapy would suffice in early stage. If endocrine non-responsive types are there like apocrine cancer, medullary cancer, adenoid cystic or metaplastic, you should give chemotherapy because they are endocrine insensitive. So, based on T size and N status, we should decide tumor biology, prognosis, and variable responses to chemotherapy. According to CalGB and International Breast Cancer Research Group, some HR positive breast cancer they do not benefit, and they are relatively chemo resistant. So, endocrine treatment alone should be considered for them. In ER positive, lymph node negative patients, you can give endocrine only. So there is a role of genomics also to help us select patient for chemotherapy if the disease is early stage. So what are the tools? They are Oncotype DX, MemmaPrint, Adjuvant Online, NPI, and Predict Score. So I'll not go into the details. You should read yourself. Otherwise, the class will be too lengthy. But to give you some idea, Oncotype DX or recurrence score assay with ER positive lymph node negative diseases is there. 21 genes from 3 studies. They have taken 16 cancer and 5 reference. These are the list, and they actually calculate the risk score from all the this information. If the recurrence score is less than 18, it is considered to be low risk. If more than 31, it is high risk, otherwise intermediate risk. So clinical validation was from NSABP B14 results. The patients with low recurrence score, they derive minimal benefit from chemotherapy, and high recurrence scores, they have large benefit from chemotherapy. As you can see here, the distant recurrence rates are highest, 30.5% with highest risk scores. So this is the guidance from NSABP B14 trial. Another is TAILORx in node negative ER positive breast cancer. It is again 21 gene recurrence score assay, less than 10 hormone therapy only, more than 25 chemotherapy, hormone therapy recommended. So they have taken recurrence score 11 to 25. They have randomized this class, which is intermediate risk, to hormonal therapy versus chemotherapy plus hormonal therapy. So this basically it was felt that it is not ethical to deprive a woman of chemotherapy if she had risk level above 20%. This was the conclusion. In RX Founder, treatment for positive node endocrine responsive breast cancer trial, use of 21 gene again, a recurrence score. If recurrence score was more than 25, chemotherapy was indicated, followed by hormone therapy. Otherwise, chemotherapy followed by hormone therapy or hormone therapy alone. What are the other molecular tools? This is MammaPrint 70 gene signature. Fresh tissue. It was approved in 2007. Lymph node negative patients of all ages. ER positive negative. Tumor size less than 5 centimeter. MindAct was phase 3 RCT. So again 70 gene recurrence and adjuvant online. PAM50 gene expression grade index. These are some of the examples of these tools. NPI is Nottingham Prognostic Index. Predict is UK prognostic model. Adjuvant Online is a web-based tool. According to the tumor size, involved lymph nodes, grading ER status, you can calculate the risk score. So, what adjuvant CT should be given? Chemotherapy. EBCTCG has told us that benefit of polychemotherapy is there over the single agent chemotherapy, and anthracycline and taxanes are better. So chemotherapy has evolved through CMF, AC, FAC, FTC followed by docetaxel, and concurrent anthracycline taxane versus sequential. These are the questions. Weekly versus 3 weekly taxane, role of dose-dense chemotherapy, and role of high-dose chemotherapy we will discuss further. So these are the main topics which will be discussed. So if you talk about history of NSABP trials, B1 was the earliest trial, Thiotepa versus placebo. And it showed advantage in pre-menopausal more than 4 nodes per positive patients. B05 in 1972, LPAM for node positive orally for 2 years, 8% and 5% DFS and OS advantage in less than 50 years of age and at 10 years follow-up. B10 was immunotherapy. That time immunotherapy was also there. LPAM 5FU with this, I think this is C. parvum, which is a protozoa infection which causes infection, but it was used in immunotherapy and hydrocortisone. There was no advantage. In B11, again LPAM 5FU plus minus adriamycin was given. In B13, sequential MTX and 5FU for node negative, ER negative tumors. It showed 8-year overall DFS survival benefit, 74% versus 59%. So how this all evolved? CMF followed by FAC, FEC, then came TAC in BCIRG trials. Parallelly, AC followed by TC, incorporation of paclitaxel, then AC, sequential taxane, AC, weekly taxane, 2 weekly, and 2 weekly paclitaxel. So in ICCG group, they have seen benefit was 50. Then ipirubicin dose was increased to 100 milligram per meter square. Then they incorporated taxanes into that. Then paclitaxel weekly. So that's how they have these chemotherapy regimens have evolved. So in adjuvant settings, if you take this, if you see this cartoon, you will easily remember when we have graduated from CMF to anthracyclines, the improvement in recurrence rates after 5 years was without chemotherapy, CMF versus no chemotherapy, it was 9.9%. When we checked anthracyclines versus CMF, it was around 3.2%. When taxanes were added to anthracycline versus anthracycline alone, again benefit of 3.6% was there. 10-year relative risk was 0.7 in CMF versus no chemo. Anthracycline versus CMF was 0.89, 11% benefit. And with taxanes, it was around 16% benefit. If you talk about hormonal therapy also improved recurrence rate. Tamoxifen 5 years versus no tamoxifen, 11.4% benefit was there. AI versus tamoxifen 5 years, it was 3.1% again. Trastuzumab anti-HER2 therapy without trastuzumab chemotherapy, DFS benefit was around with 6 to 9%, and after 10 to 11 years, it was hazard ratio was 0.72 to 0.77. So this is a very good slide depicting the benefit of different agents. So what was CMF? Cyclophosphamide, methotrexate, and 5-FU. It was first generation regimen, and it was first to show improved DFS and OS in adjuvant settings. It was well tolerated. Only some fatigue, nausea, and diarrhea was there, but use has diminished with data showing benefit of anthracyclines. So rarely, for those patients who are very frail, oral CMF sometimes we use. So some of you may not be knowing oral CMF. It was used long back in 80s and 90s. Consisted of cyclophosphamide tablets, day 1 to day 14, methotrexate 40 milligram per meter square weekly, day 1 and day 8, and 5-FU 600 milligram per meter square. It was injectable only, day 1 and day 8. Then came CMF IV, then epirubicin with CMF. So what was the crux overview analysis of anthracycline based therapy versus CMF? 11 trials, 6,000 patients were included. Around 2,000 patients they received doxorubicin containing regimen in 6 trials. Around 1,300 patients received epirubicin containing regimen in 5 trials. So ABCTCG was published in Lancet in 1998, and it showed absolute risk reduction recurrence 3.2%. For death, it was 2.7%, and it was updated in 2005. Still significant difference exists. In 2005, anthracycline-based polychemotherapy with FAC or FEC reduced annual breast cancer death rate by about 38%, and about 20% for those aged 50 to 69 years. Significantly more effective than CMF, and final mortality reductions were 57% and 45%. Overall survival comparably improved. So this is a slide which shows other regimens, mainly anthracycline based versus CMF. First was SESG group, 74% overall survival for anthracyclines versus 68% for CMF. So we will discuss them one by one. This is again for AC and NSA-BPB15 trials. It showed that AC4 equals to CMF6. So patients were stratified according to the number of nodes, type of operation. Patients were taken after total mastectomy or lumpectomy with axillary resection followed by radiation. Positive nodes, age less than equal to 49 years or 50 to 49 years. So they were randomized to AC4 or AC4 followed by CMF into 3 or 6 cycles of CMF only. And it showed that no significant difference in disease-free survival was there, and or in distant disease-free survival or overall survival among the 3 groups. But AC was equal to 6 CMF, 4 AC, and patients AC was preferable since it was completed earlier, and patient visited health professionals 3 times as often for conventional CMF. Nausea control medications were used for 12 days only in AC as compared to CMF, where it was used for 84 days. So it is less cumbersome, less time consuming, less nausea was there for AC patients versus CMF. Then FAC. FAC was polychemotherapy again containing adriamycin. So there was no significant difference in SC, this Spanish trial in overall survival rates. It was not significant between CAF and CMF. Major toxicities were similar. Then SWAP trial, intergroup 0102 trial, CMF versus FAC in node negative EBC. So CF again was not significantly better than CMF in DFS. But CAF had slightly better OS than CMF in this trial. Toxicity was again greater with CAF. So in 2011 meta-analysis, it basically meddled with the doses of anthracycline, whether it is AC in CalGB trial 9344 compared 60 milligram per meter square, 75 milligram per meter square, and 90 milligram per meter square, along with use of GCSF. They were randomized according to the doses. Followed by a randomized to second randomization was with paclitaxel or no paclitaxel. It was same in all the three arms. So then CalGB 8541, it evaluated three doses of anthracyclines, 30, 40, and 60. The benefit was with high dose in OS and RFS in HER2 positive patients. This was the peculiarity. So if you see these trials, in ICCG trial 1996, PEG50 and CMF had similar efficacy in node positive, T-minus positive patients. FASD actually tried to find out the dose of epirubicin, FEC 100 versus FEC 50. 100 is the dose of epirubicin, 100 milligram per meter square, and 50 milligram per meter square. So 5-year RFS was 65 versus 52%. And it clearly showed benefit with higher dose. Relative risk reduction was 32%. OS, again, relative risk reduction was 31%. But if you increase epirubicin dose, then chances of CHF, AML, and ALL also increases. But here you can see it was not very much higher, 1.1% versus 0.4%. Yeah. So this was again Peto meta-analysis. This cartoon will show you the 10-year gain in breast cancer mortality in taxanes versus anthracyclines versus CMF versus no chemotherapy. So CMF versus no chemotherapy gain was again 4.3%. Anthracycline versus CMF 10-year gain 4.3%. 10-year gain 5.1% when anthracycline and taxanes were compared. So just to remind you, this was put here. So what is the role of taxanes? If we give taxane or no taxane, what we actually gain by adding taxanes to the AC chemotherapy. So here you can see AC chemotherapy 60, 75 or 90 milligram per meter square. Cyclophosphamide 600 milligram per meter square, more than 3,000 patients, CalGB 9344 trial, paclitaxel versus no paclitaxel. So 5-year DFS was 65 versus 70%. 5-year OS was 77 versus 80%. Both were significant. So taxanes are important according to this trial. This is PAX-01 trial, FEC followed by docetaxel. So after surgery they were randomized, patients were randomized in FEC or FEC followed by docetaxel. 3-cycle FEC, 3-cycle docetaxel. Dose was epirubicin 100 milligram per meter square, docetaxel 100 milligram per meter square every 21 days. They were stratified according to center, age more or less than 50 years, nodes 1 to 3 or more than 4. So what were the key outcomes? Superior DFS and OS irrespective of number of nodes or hormonal status, 18% reduction in risk of relapse, 23% reduction in risk of death, and significant DFS benefit with FECD in more than or equal to 50 years of age group. Febrile neutropenia was more, but it was less than TAC and reduced risk of acute and delayed cardiac events because of 50% less exposure to anthracyclines. Because instead of giving 6 cycles of epirubicin, we are stopping at 3 and introducing taxi. So it is a reasonable alternative in patients more than equal to 50 years of age, and if they are having comorbidities. So now the question comes whether it should be given, taxane should be given concurrent or sequential. So two trials, they have addressed this thing, BCIRG 005 and NSABP B30 trial. So BCIRG 005, it is a breast cancer international research group trial. They have stratified the patients according to HER2 status, whether it was positive or negative. So here we will focus on HER2 negative patients. It was phase 3 RCT, TAC into 6 versus AC4 and followed by Taxane 4. And EBC patients, HER2 normal and auxiliary fluid positive patients were taken. This is the study schema. HER2 negative patients, around 3,000 patients, 4 AC followed by 4 docetaxel versus 6 into TAC. Prophylactic ciprofloxacin they have given. Major eligibility criteria was HER2 normal by central fish, proven node positive, stage 3 1 to 3 N1 M0, age less than 70 years, KPS should be more than 80%. So primary endpoints were DFS, secondary OS and safety. Here you can see DFS was not much different with a primary analysis. Overall survival benefit was also not significant. But with TAC, febrile neutropenia rates and thrombocytopenia rates were much higher, grade 3 and grade 4. While AC and T, it was statistically significantly low. Non-hematological adverse events were more with ACT, like arthralgia, fluid retention, myalgia. These kind of side effects were more with AC followed by docetaxel. So TFS is equivalent and higher dose intensity ACT was delivering. Despite that, for each of the 3 agents and requiring 8 cycles, it was not more effective. So more cycles and more dose intensity, but the results were similar. What were the highlights? That more febrile neutropenia and more GSF use with TAC, less sensory neuropathy, nail chain myalgia with TAC. So this was the takeaway point. Then NSABP B30 was conducted between 1999 and 2004. So it again actually decided the roles of sequential versus concurrent taxanes. 3 arms, AC followed by T, AT into 4 cycles and TAG into 4 cycles. ATA DFS was better than concurrent, sequential better than concurrent, and AT non-inferior to TAC. Then came this E1199 trial, paclitaxel dose versus docetaxel dose. 2 into 2 trial was there. Paclitaxel, there were 4 arms. After AC, 3 weekly versus weekly paclitaxel, and the lower 2 arms were docetaxel 3 weekly versus docetaxel weekly arm. Doses were again in 3 weekly paclitaxel 175 milligram per meter square. Total cumulative dose was 700. Here in weekly it was 80 milligram per meter square per week, which comes to about 960. So dose was higher. In docetaxel 100 milligram per meter square, 3 weekly 400, 35 milligram per meter square weekly, that comes to about 420 milligram per meter square cumulative dose. So if you compare these, hazard ratio was same, more than 1. P-value was not significant. There was no significant difference in taxane or schedule, but there was a hint. You can see here in P1 and D3, it was highlighted. It was the hint that the best outcome in weekly paclitaxel or 3 weeks docetaxel. So if you have to choose between weekly and 3 weekly paclitaxel, weekly is better and 3 weekly docetaxel is better. In toxicity, you can see here clearly D3 means 3 weekly docetaxel was having more hematological toxicity, infection rates, stomatitis, fatigue, myalgia, arthralgia, etc. If you take P3 versus P1, myalgia was more, neutropenia was more in P3, and grade 2 to 4 neuropathy was greater in weekly paclitaxel. But grade 3, 4 neuropathy was more in weekly paclitaxel. You can see here. In D1 versus D3, hematological toxicity, fatigue were more in D3 arm, and neuropathy was almost same in the both arms. Then BCIRG 001 trial, TAC versus FAC, 1400 patients, node positive, follow-up was 124 months. DFS in TAC was 62% versus 55% in FAC. So no taxane versus taxane better again in BCIRG trial, 10-year overall survival of 676 versus 69%, p-value was significant. So again, taxanes are with anthracyclines are better. Then this was CalGD 9741 trial, 2x2 factorial design, 2 weekly versus 3 weekly regimen, sequential and concurrent. Both were tested here. So AC and paclitaxel, A followed by C followed by paclitaxel. Here it is AC concurrent followed by paclitaxel. 2 weekly versus 3 weekly. Overall survival in 2 weekly, 31% reduction in mortality was there. P-value was significant. So key findings at 4 years, 26% reduction in risk of recurrence, 31% improvement in OS with dose dense, and significant improvement in DFS for dose dense regimen, 82 versus 75%. OS also improved. Dose density improved, DFS and OS. No difference was seen between sequential or concurrent schedule. Dose density improved. So these 2 points are highlighted here. Then in node negative breast cancer, this is French trial GCAM 9805, which was FAC versus TAC. There was significant toxicity, so they moved to FAC versus FAC followed by weekly paclitaxel. So FAC versus TAC, high risk node negative patients defined who are 3 age less than 35 years. So post primary surgery, operable breast cancers, 18 to 70 years of age, they were randomized to TAC 3 weekly 6 cycles or FAC 3 weekly 6 cycles. Primary endpoints were DFS, secondary OS. So after 77 months, they found that TAC group had 32% reduction in risk of having an event. Estimated DFS 5 years, 90% in TAC versus 85% in FAC group, 24% reduction in the risk of death among those who received TAC. Safety wise, TAC was more toxic than FAC in terms of neutropenia, leukopenia, or whether it is peripheral motor neuropathy, pain, pyrexia, skin changes. TAC was more toxic. So the key findings, takeaway messages from GCAM 9805, high risk node negative breast cancers, TAC significantly improved DFS, and this benefit may be due to hormonal effect in the premenopausal women. So chemotherapy induced amenorrhea made the difference here. And postmenopausal women also derived benefit. Next study, FAC versus 4-FAC and weekly paclitaxel into 8. So this was again high risk cases as per St. Gallen's criteria, node negative. 5-year DFS was 93% in FAC weekly paclitaxel versus 90% in FAC only. So risk of relapse was reduced by 26% compared with FAC, which was statistically significant, but more at the cost of more fatigue, sensory neuropathy, or persistent amenorrhea. Then came AC versus AC followed by paclitaxel. This was addressed by 9344 CalGB, NSABP B28. So 5-year DFS in CalGB trial was 65 versus 70%, OS was 77 versus 80%. Clearly showed the benefit of adding taxanes to AC. NSABP showed the similar thing, 72% versus 76%, but OS was not different. So which regimen should we use? There are no recommendations based on histopathology or intrinsic types, subtypes, but times are changing fast. We are looking at the subtype of or risk profile of the patients and then choosing chemotherapy. But still, a lot of efforts are needed to do that. Nowadays, commonly we choose chemotherapy based on comorbidities, side effect profile, and patient's preference. So mainly 3 types of breast cancers are there according to the choice of chemotherapy, or we make chemotherapy choices in these subgroups, whether they are endocrine responsive, HER2 positive, or TNBC. So which patients and what regimen? In endocrine responsive, luminal A, node negative, no chemotherapy, only endocrine therapy. Node positive, absolute benefit of CT is questionable, but addition of CT to be discussed with the patient in early breast cancer patients, not in node positive or higher tumor burden. Chemotherapy should be given. So luminal B, they are the subtypes with higher Ki67 index, aggressive type of cancers, risk of relapse is high. So chemotherapy, endocrine therapy, both should be given. And choice of chemotherapy is based on risk of relapse. If luminal B with additional risk factors, there are PT more than 1 or nodal positive patients, sequential anthracyclines and taxanes. If luminal B without additional high risk factors are there, then docetaxel, cyclophosphamide, or EC or CMF even will suffice, because these regimens, they spare toxicity and they do not compromise efficacy. Then the broad subgroup, HER2 positive breast cancer is there. So what should we give? Trastuzumab plus chemotherapy. Major consideration whether or not to add an anthracycline. And this observed increased sensitivity of HER2 tumors to anthracycline is due to topoisomerase 2A amplification. So this cartoon will show you that the HER2 positive disease is poor without HER2 targeted agents. You can see here response to chemo only. In these type of patients, luminal A has the highest response, probability of overall survival, followed by luminal B, followed by HER2, and then luminal, then basal type of patient. So basal and HER2 positive without targeted agents, they have similar overall survival, or slightly better than HER2 positive. So these are the 4 pivotal trials which showed us that if we add 1 year of adjuvant trastuzumab, this improves survival of the patients. One is HERA, BCIRG006, NCCTG 9831, and SABPP30. So we'll discuss them one by one. This is a cartoon forest plot which shows us that overall survival or DFS benefit is there with incorporation of trastuzumab with chemotherapy. This is HERA trial, BCIRG trial. So everywhere it is favoring trastuzumab, whether it is OS, whether it is DFS, whether it is NCCTG trial, joint analysis of B31, N831, 9831, BCIRG or HERA. So increase in DFS of 36 to 58% and increase in distant DFS. So what are the risk factors for recurrence of HER2 positive early breast cancers treated with trastuzumab based chemotherapy? So this study was done in Germany. They have taken many variable models, and according to this study, what they have found, primary tumor, if it is higher stage T2 to T4, or nodal positive, or if it is hormone status positive, these are depicted to be high risk disease. So if HER2 disease is T2 to T4 node positive, hormone receptor positive, this is high risk. So these 4 trials, one by one, we'll discuss. HERA, trastuzumab in HER2 positive early stage breast cancers. So women with HER2 positive early stage invasive breast cancers after surgery and adjuvant neoadjuvant chemotherapy or radiotherapy were taken around 3,400 patients. They have randomized to observation versus 1 year of 2 year of 8 milligram per kilogram loading dose, 2 years of trastuzumab. Then after 2 years, they were taken, and 23 months follow-up results are there. Decrease in the rate of recurrence by 50%, and largest benefit reported after tamoxifen. Absolute benefit in DFS 6.3%. Absolute benefit in OS was 2.7%. CHF rates were 0.6%. Brain metastasis was in 2% compared to 1% in non-Herceptin. Means local disease-free survival was there, but distant disease-free survival was not there. In NSABP, P31 and NCCTG 9831, these are the two important trials. So after AC, patients were randomized to taxane high dose, means 3 weekly 4 cycles, with concurrent trastuzumab in B31 trial versus only paclitaxel 4 cycles 3 weekly. In NCCTG, it was again 3 arms, low dose paclitaxel weekly for 12 weeks with concurrent trastuzumab, or weekly paclitaxel followed by trastuzumab for 64 up to 64 weeks, or only 12 cycles of weekly paclitaxel. 3-year results, absolute DFS was 11.8%. Combined analysis, 39% reduction in the risk of death and 48% reduction of risk of recurrence was there. Then came this FINHER study, 232 patients, HER2 positive, 4 arms, docetaxel plus FEC, same arm with trastuzumab, vinorelbine plus FEC, same arm with trastuzumab. For 9 weeks, trastuzumab was given. So result, distant recurrence was significantly reduced. Trastuzumab arm had better 3-year RFS, 89 versus 78%. Docetaxel arm was associated with more adverse effects than was vinorelbine, and trastuzumab was not associated with decreased left ventricular ejection fraction or cardiac failure. But there were problems. What were the problems encountered? Hypersensitivity with trastuzumab, cardiotoxicity, CHF rates grade 3 or 4, 0.5 to 4% were there. Asymptomatic drop in LVF up to 11.3% patients were having this thing. With anthracyclines, it is problematic. It warrants monitoring. Cost has increased. So these are the problems with trastuzumab. Then BCIRG 006 trial was there, which compared AC followed by docetaxel with AC with TH, and third arm was TCH in adjuvant treatment of HER2 amplified early breast cancer. So this was the design: AC followed by T, AC followed by TH with concurrent docetaxel and trastuzumab, weekly followed by 3 weekly doses. In TCH, there was docetaxel carboplatin and trastuzumab up to 1 year, weekly with concurrent cycles, and then 3 weekly afterwards. They were stratified by nodes and hormonal receptor status. So first analysis, disease-free survival in June 2005. 84% in ACTH arm, 80% in TCH arm, and worst was with AC followed by T only. So both arms with trastuzumab did better. Third analysis showed the similar things. Uh, this lowest, this curve was AC followed by T, 75%, 81% TCH, 84% ACTH. It is statistically significant, hazard ratio of 0.64 with ACTH and 0.75 with TCH. Third analysis came and it again showed that ACTH is better, followed by not very significant difference TCH and then ACT. So therapeutic index, if we use AC followed by TH, DFS events were 185, in TCH 214, grade 3 or 4 CHF was there in 21 patients, in 4 patients only with TCH, 5 times more with AC and TH. Treatment related leukemias, more again in AC and TH, and only one patient which was treated for lymphoma with CHOP therapy, and probably CHOP caused the leukemia. LVEF loss, more than 10% sustained LVEF loss was there in ACTH arm in 194 patients versus 97 patients in TCH. So clearly, the risk profile favored TCH. So trastuzumab provides a similar significant advantage, both DFS and OS, when used with ACTH or TCH. Acute and chronic toxicity profile favors TCH. No significant advantage of ACTH over TCH, and CHF was 5 times more in ACTH than in TCH. Then patient with lower risk, these are the newer studies. These are taken from the CCO site. Lower risk HER2 positive EBC. What should we do? So these are evolving paradigms, evolving regimens. They have shown clearly in this study in JCO that patients, when HER2 status analysis was done and outcomes were analyzed by HER2 status in patients with T1A or B node negative disease at MD Anderson Cancer Center from 1990 to 2002 with median follow-up 74 months. DFS in HER2 negative patients was 93.7%, and HER2 positive patients was 77% only. You can see the red curve here. Distant DFS was also very dismal, 86% versus 97% in HER2 positive and HER2 negative disease respectively, which was both were significant, 0.0001 p-value. So this shows that early breast cancers also, T1A and T1B also, they have dismal prognosis and decreased DFS when they are HER2 positive. In APT trial, they have given adjuvant paclitaxel plus trastuzumab for small, less than 3 centimeter size node negative HER2 positive EBC. This was done by Taloni et al. In JCO. It was published in 2019. Patient received paclitaxel 80 mg per meter square, trastuzumab 2 mg per kilogram weekly for 12 cycles, followed up by trastuzumab to complete 1 full year. So if you see the breakup, T1 microscopic 2 patients, T1A, B, and C, most patients, and T2 9 patients. HR positive 67 patients and 33 negative patients. So here you can see that HR positive patients DFS probability was better when treated with trastuzumab, and DFS probability, 3-year DFS probability or 5-year DFS probability was again it was better in or similar in both the arms. So second graph is more important here. Then structure, this is TDM1 newer molecule, HER2 targeted antibody drug conjugate. Antigen is HER2, antibody is monoclonal antibody trastuzumab, linker is there. Then cytotoxic agent is DM1, M10scene, trastuzumab M10scene, TDM1. So it is a highly potent tubulin destabilizer. So antibody drug conjugate. This is the trial phase 2 attempt trial, and stage 1 HER2 positive patients with N0 and N1 microscopic disease. LVF should be more than 50%. No prior invasive breast cancer surgery in less than 90 days. So they were randomized to TDM1 alone or paclitaxel plus trastuzumab followed by trastuzumab into 13 cycles to complete 1 year. So they are followed up for 5 years after final dose of TDM1 or TH. 1 year of TDM versus paclitaxel trastuzumab for 1 year. So baseline characteristics, T1A or T1B patients 43%, and rest of the patients 57% were T2 patients or T1 patients. So DFS you can see here, not much significant. TDM1 or paclitaxel trastuzumab in AP trial or attempt trial, and but you can see here in patients with tumor size less than 1 T or more than 1 T size, 3-year DFS was comparable. So no advantage of TDM1 versus paclitaxel trastuzumab for 1 year. So again, newer studies in adjuvant therapy, higher risk HER2 positive EBC. So they have now come up with niraparib, trastuzumab, pertuzumab, and TDM1. Niraparib is approved by FDA in 2017 as an extended adjuvant treatment for patients with HER2 overexpressed EBC following the adjuvant trastuzumab-based therapy. Trastuzumab, pertuzumab, the combination is approved by FDA in 2017 for neoadjuvant treatment. Node positive breast cancer HER2 positive patients, and adjuvant treatment of HER2 positive EBC at higher risk of recurrence. TDM1 is approved as adjuvant therapy for patients with HER2 positive EBC and residual invasive disease, means those patients who have not achieved PCR, pathological CR after neoadjuvant trastuzumab based treatment. So those patients, what is the basis after that we'll see in the further slides. This is affinity trial which showed us the trastuzumab pertuzumab combination versus chemotherapy trastuzumab and placebo. No pertuzumab versus pertuzumab. Up to 1 year it was given, 10-year follow-up was done, and it showed us that slight improvement is there in OS data. You can see here stratified HR was 0.76%. 0.76 means 24% improvement was there with pertuzumab in year 6. In node positive patients, node positive cohort, the HR was more robust, you can say here. In node negative, it was HR hazard ratio was 1, more than 1, it is 0.72 here. So this niraparib is pan-HER TKI, irreversible inhibition is there, different mechanism of action than trastuzumab and pertuzumab. So you can read later on about niraparib, lapatinib, trastuzumab mechanism of action. So this is XTNet trial, 5-year update, niraparib versus placebo after adjuvant trastuzumab and early HER2 positive breast cancers. So 2 arms again, niraparib 240 milligram per day versus placebo after this adjuvant therapy, patients were stratified stage 1 to 3 patients after adjuvant trastuzumab completed less than 2 years ago, node positive disease or residual disease after neoadjuvant therapy. Here you can see 5-year invasive disease-free survival, 90.2% in neratinib arm versus 87.7% in the placebo arm. Again, hazard ratio is 0.73, and it is statistically significant. Hormone receptor positive, again, these patients, because they are high risk, they benefited better with hazard ratio of 0.6. While hormone receptor negative patients, they did not derive such benefit. Hazard ratio was only 0.95. So, if you talk about patient subgroup, hormone receptor positive in less than 1 year from last dose of trastuzumab, the difference was 5.1%. But hormone receptor positive and more than 1 year, less than 1 year from last dose of trastuzumab without PCR after neoadjuvant treatment, they benefited most. 7.4% benefit, hazard ratio 0.6. Then another particle, trastuzumab and emtansine. So again, this is antibody drug conjugate. Catherine trial, TDM1 versus trastuzumab as adjuvant therapy for HER2 positive ABC. So patients, this was a phase 3 study, HER2 ABC, T1 to 4 and 0 to 3, who had residual invasive disease in breast or axillary nodes. Both were taken. So no PCR after neoadjuvant trastuzumab therapy. So whether trastuzumab was continued or changed to TDM1 had made a difference or not. Primary endpoint was invasive disease-free survival. Secondary were RFS, OS, or safety. So trastuzumab alone in TDM1 arm as neoadjuvant therapy in about 80% patients, and similarly in the trastuzumab arm. Trastuzumab pertuzumab was used as neoadjuvant in 70, around 18% patients in both arms. So invasive disease-free survival was 91 or 3-year IDFS was 88.3% in TDM1 arm versus 77% in trastuzumab arm. So hazard ratio was 0.50, 50% benefit was there. So distant recurrence was less with TDM1, 10.5% in brain CNS events versus 15.9% in trastuzumab arm. Locoregional recurrence was also less, contralateral breast cancer recurrence was also less, and death without prior event similar. So this forest plot shows you that the benefit with TDM was there, whether it is hormone receptor positive or negative. Preoperative therapy was used with combination or trastuzumab alone, and in both patients, whether it was node positive or node negative. Secondary endpoints, hazard ratio is also showing a promise. In distant recurrence, hazard ratio is 0.6. In overall survival, hazard ratio again 0.7. This is Catalin trial, Neo trial, adjuvant TDM1 with paclitaxel versus trastuzumab taxane after anthracyclines in high-risk early breast cancer. So again, 2 arms after anthracyclines, 3-4 cycles, TDM1 plus pertuzumab for up to 18 cycles or to complete 1 year, trastuzumab, pertuzumab up to 1 year, plus taxanes 3 to 4 cycles or 12 weeks. So this was the combination. TDM1 was plus pertuzumab or trastuzumab plus pertuzumab, 2 arms. Endpoints: primary IDFS, secondary OS, secondary malignancies, and others. So primary endpoints, primary analysis, outcomes. Uh, you can see here hazard ratio was there 0.97, which was not very significant, and trial this failed to meet co-primary endpoints. TDM1 plus pertuzumab after anthracyclines did not significantly reduce risk of IDFS events. So what do we do? So this is the strategy. If patient is clinically having T1A or B and node negative disease, surgery followed by trastuzumab based therapy is recommended. Observation can also be done, but if you decide to choose trastuzumab based therapy, you can use taxane, trastuzumab, or TCH, followed by 1 year of trastuzumab therapy. So it was to be given in high risk patients, criteria being age less than 35 years, grade 3 ARPR negative multifocal disease. So if it is T1C and 0 disease, you should assess the risk and patient preference also. If it is clearly T2 or node positive, neoadjuvant TCHP or AC-TCHP should be given. Both can be used. Personally, I prefer TCH. So that way you can decrease the dose of anthracyclines, and secondary malignancies can also be minimized theoretically. So if PCR is there in hormone receptor positive patients, complete 1 year of trastuzumab plus minus pertuzumab and follow them up with niraparib. But in hormone receptor negative patients, complete 1 year of trastuzumab and pertuzumab, and there is no consensus whether niraparib should be used or not, because these are lower risk patients with hormone receptor negative. If there is no PCR after neoadjuvant TCHP or ACTHP, residual invasive disease is there, TDM1 should be given up to 1 year. Means trastuzumab, pertuzumab should be changed to TDM1. Whether niraparib should be given for HR patients, that has not been explored. Future directions, these are the trials which are going on. They will again tell us whether these combinations with other immunotherapy like atezolizumab or other strategies like trastuzumab, pertuzumab, palbociclib, and these ovarian conservation will help us or not. So I think one more pertinent thing is there. Can we shorten the duration of trastuzumab? So these trials like SOLD, Short Hair, FAIR, Hellenic Oncology, and Persephone, they are actually investigating these things, and results are encouraging. Non-inferiority trials are there. If they tell us that we can decrease the duration of trastuzumab to 6 months, that would be great in terms of decreasing the cost of therapy and cardiac side effects also. So as of now, they have not made it standard of care. Still, standard of care is 1 year of trastuzumab, but shortened if the patient cannot afford with these upcoming results. Shorter duration is also better. If you can give up to 6 months, better. If not, use FINHER results and at least try to give 9 weeks of trastuzumab. So I think we should call it a day. It has been around 1 hour of this class. What do you say, people?
How many more slides are pending? How many more slides?
30 more slides are there.
Okay, what I was thinking, can we have
another class? I think we can.
Another class.
Yeah.
Just
TNBC, TNBC is a separate entity. More trials are there.
Dr. Harsh, please unmute yourself once again. Can you please unmute yourself once again? Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling TNBC and other things. I think we can have another class sometime.
Okay, so yeah, that can be arranged. Let me see if we can organize this month or maybe next month.
Mhm. Okay. So if
Any questions so far? So anyone can unmute yourself. Everyone can unmute actually. So please unmute yourself if you have any question. You can directly ask. So Dr. Devanjan has said awesome class. Thank you.
exhaustive.
Yeah,
Sorry for that.
yeah. You took a lot of pain in making this. I understand you. I think you have actually started from all the very basics. All the hypotheses that were so nice. I remember I studied all these things when I was JR.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it was too long, but because this is only one class was allotted, so I had to.
You never told me. You never told me that you required 2 classes. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so I think you made it so everything is there, so there is no question actually. I think you have
They can read
explained
it
each
up.
and everything.
Everything they'll get to know.
Yeah, so nothing unexplained, nothing untold. Great. Okay, thank you so much then.
Thank you.
Let me see how can we organize this. I will keep in touch with you.
Okay.
We'll post another class for this.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Good night. Good night.
Yeah, Dr. Rokon, actually, I am trying very hard to upload all the videos, but I am bit occupied, so not getting too much time to edit and then upload. But yes, I am trying. Whenever I am getting some time, I am keeping on uploading them. Okay, there is one question from Dr. Parag. How to choose between TC and AC then T?
I think he must have joined late. So AC and T sequential is better than TC. It was shown by these trials earlier, EBC TCG trial also, and then later on when we have shown that sequential T is better than the concurrent thing. So BCIRG trial, NCCTG trial, these all trials showed that sequential is better than concurrent. And anthracycline and taxanes both are better than the taxane or anthracycline alone. I think you should go through the presentation again and you will know. Trials are there.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Harsh.
Thank you, everyone. I'm getting late.
Yeah, thank you once again. And zoledronic in adjuvant systemic therapy.
So what we try to do is when we are giving adjuvant hormonal therapy, then there are some evidence that hormonal therapy causes osteoporosis and severe osteopenia also. So in those patients who are ER positive and they are on hormonal receptor hormone therapy, we should give zoledronic acid at least once in 6 months. There is some DFS benefit also, and risk of osteoporosis and secondary events, skeletal events, is also minimized. So